following are encounters with the strange and unexplainable, as told by the people who experience them.
My dad is from West Virginia. Being from West Virginia, we grew up with all the stories and all the stuff, all the Appalachian uh, things that go with that. The things like you don't whistle at night, you don't stare into a tree line. If you think you see something, you didn't. If something calls your name, you didn't hear that. That kind of stuff. Um, I didn't know my grandparents on my mother's side. They were both gone before I was born. I knew my grandmother on my dad's side. I barely remember my grandfather on my dad's side. This is where the story starts. We grew up in a 150-year-old farmhouse. So the upstairs had two bedrooms. My sisters and I were in one bedroom. My parents were in another bedroom. My grandfather died when I was 5 years old. Shortly after my grandfather died, I started having what everybody said was nightmares. I would see Grandpa in our room. And everybody's like, oh, no, 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 that can't be right. Well, Grandpa would pretty much almost every night would come out of our closet in our bedroom. And you stand scared, 5 years old, scared the crap out of me. And for years and years and years, my parents would come in. Now you just stop that. And it's like I'm seeing Grandpa coming out of the closet. Like, no, 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 no. You're just dreaming. So it got to where they would keep the closet door shut. When we go to bed, they'd come in, they'd close the door. Didn't have really a good latch on it. They would just close the door and put something out. No, go to bed. That didn't work. The door would open. Grandpa would come out. So it got to where they fixed the latch on the door, and the latch, there were times when the door would rattle. If it was latched, it would rattle a couple times, then it would stop. So at 5 years old, you don't know what to think. And it was just that scary. So that's pretty much the big part of the first part of this. Jump the clock ahead a few years. I get married. I build a house up over the hill from my parents. My dad starts telling me about seeing his mom and dad in their bedroom. And he said, you're not going to believe this, but I saw mom and dad. Mom and dad are here. Mom and dad are coming to the house. Mom and dad are stopping. And I said, well, I told you when I was a kid that I saw Grandpa every night. It got so bad with me, even now as an adult, I can't sleep in a room if there's a door open. I have to make sure closet doors are shut. Doors have to be, and they have to be latched. I can't sleep in a room with an open door. I can't at all. The deal with Dad got to be a little bit stranger because after his brother died, he told me that he saw not only just his parents, but his brother was there as well. I have no reason to doubt that, but the level of weirdness is just weird as far as that goes. So I'm an adult now. I've built a house. We get married. I have kids. We put you're going to love this. When my oldest son was born, we put a little thing in his crib that if he would wake up and bump it, or he'd spin it, it had a thing on the bottom, he'd spin it and it would play music and light up. I was working crazy hours. I was working 3:30 to 1 Monday through Friday, and Monday through Thursday, and then 10 to 2 on Friday. So when I would come home from work at night, I would go back and check on him. And I went back. One night, come home from work, I went back. The thing's playing. So I went back, checked on the baby. He's sleeping. So I tucked him in. It quit playing. Everything's good. Didn't turn the light on. Walk back up the hall. I get almost to the bedroom. It starts playing again. So, well, he must be awake. So I go back down the hall, walk into the bedroom. Still don't turn the lights on. The thing's playing. I walked into the bedroom and it stopped. So I reach across again and I tuck the blanket, make sure he's not awake. Start back up the hall. I get about 3/4 of the way up the hall. This time it starts playing again. So I turn around and I go back down the hall. I turned on the hall light and it stopped. I thought, well, that was kind of odd, but it's on a timer. When in that time, he's sleeping. I thought, okay, maybe it's just me imagining stuff, but I couldn't have been. So I went back out, turned the hallway light off, got about halfway up the hall. This time it starts playing again. Now I'm just irritated. So I go back down the hall. He's sleeping. I go in, picked the thing up and I turned the switch off. Put it back down. Boom, back up the hall. Again, halfway up the hall, it starts playing. Now I'm like, well, this is great. We paid a lot of money for a piece of crap that's probably broke. Now I'm really mad and it won't stop playing. And I'm mad and I'm back to the hall. He's still sleeping. So I picked the thing up, opened the back up, took the batteries out of it, put them on the dresser, put it back down, and went back up the hall. Started back up the hall. Get about 1/4 of the way this time, and it starts again. Now I'm getting a little bit weirded out. That time I come down the hall, left the light off, reached in, turned the bedroom light. Well, I looked in the bedroom, and there's a rocking chair in there, and it's rocking. There's no wind. This chair's rocking, just like somebody's sitting in it. And I reached in and turned on the bedroom light, and it stopped. Like half rock, it stopped. Boom. I'm done. I scooped him up, went out the door, closed the door behind me, went to our bedroom. I went in, I woke her up. I said, listen, he's staying with us tonight. Something's going on. I don't understand what it is. I'll tell you in the morning. I don't know what I thought closing the door was going to do, but I closed his door and closed our door. I don't know why I thought that was going to stop, but it's in my mind that worked. So no explanation for it. Called my dad the next day. I said, Dad, there's something weird going on. I told him what happened. He started kind of laughed and he said, well, you saw Grandpa when you were a kid. Maybe it's Grandma and Grandpa. Ha, 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 ha. Big joke. I'm like, I don't know, but it freaked me out. He said, well, don't get weirded out about it. It's probably just Mom and Dad. Don't worry about it. Don't worry. It's fine. It'll be all right. Well, no, I was freaked out. Moved him into a different room, thinking that's going to solve. I don't know what that was going to solve, but that happened constantly after that. I would come in, that thing would be playing, the chair would be rocking. So I started going back to hall, and I said, I don't know what I'm going to do. Dad says, just go in and say, Mom, Dad, I'm tired. I don't want to deal with this. Please stop. Not tonight. So if I came in and it was playing music and the chair was moving and stuff, I would just go, Grandma, I'm tired. Can you please not do this tonight? And it would stop. Everything would quit. And I was like, well, I got a brand new house, $60,000 home, brand new house, and it's haunted. This is great. This is great. Fantastic. But didn't think a whole lot. I told her the same thing. I said, if that starts happening when I'm not home, just say, Grandma, I'm tired. Just please stop. It never happened when she was home, only when I got home. So don't think a whole lot of it. My oldest son gets to be 2, 3, he's about 4 years old, I guess. His brother was 2. They were both kind of talking. But my dad gave me a picture of my grandparents. So I put this picture up. My oldest son came out one day and he said, Daddy, who are those people in that picture? And I said, well, that's your great-grandma and your great-grandpa in their house in West Virginia. Why? And he said, they're nice people. And I said, what do you mean they're nice people? He said, that lady sits in the rocking chair and sings to me, and that man tells me stories. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I'm back on the phone. Dad, listen, this is what he's calm down. Calm down. Calm down. It's just Mom and Dad. Don't worry about it. They're not going to do anything. Don't worry about it. The youngest isn't telling me anything yet, but this still going on. This stuff's still going on at night. So Caleb gets to be 3. My youngest gets to be 3 or 4 years old. Same deal. I put the picture away so he didn't see it. So he gets to be a little bit older. And one day he looks, he says, I got the picture back out. He said, what's this? Who are these people? I said, well, that's your great-grandma and great-grandpa. I get the same exact thing, pretty much verbatim. He goes, those are really nice people. They're really, really nice people. I really like that lady. And I said, huh? He said, she sits in sits in the chair in my room and reads me stories, tells me stories, and that man talks to me. And I'm like, oh, 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 great. That's just, yeah. So that's it. That's pretty much the first story. So my son's a senior in high school, and he had a friend that was in an abusive home situation. She kept coming to our house all the time because things would happen at home. She'd run here. It was a whole big thing for probably, I don't know, 6 months. And cops were here just about every day, and they'd pick her home, and she'd just take off again. And so it ended up, it came to a head about 3 months before school was out, where it got bad enough that the police came and they were like, she's staying with you. If you guys don't have a problem, she's going to stay with you and finish out the school year. I'm good with that. So she moves in here. We moved my youngest in with his brother. And I told her, I said, now listen, I got to give you a heads up because you're going to get freaked out if I don't. She said, what? Now this girl calls me dad. She's like, what, dad? And I said, well, we got ghosts. And she said, yeah, right. I'm like, no, I'm serious. I said, my grandparents visit the kids. Okay. And she goes, I said, I've had what I think is the ghost of one of my aunts here. And that I got a picture of. That's a totally different weird story. But I said, you're going to know if you're not going to see them, but you're going to know they're here. I don't think you'll see them, but you'll know they're here. I mean, you'll see something out of the corner of your eye that you look and it's not there. I'm telling you, I'm just giving, yeah, you're trying to scare me. Okay, well, forewarned is forearmed. And if you don't believe it, that's fine. I'm just telling you, you're going to see some weird stuff. Maybe. A couple weeks go by. They come home from school. The boys are doing their homework. She comes out of the bedroom and she goes, she asked where my youngest son was. And I said, he's doing his homework. So he was just standing in the doorway back there. No, he wasn't. I said, he's in my room using the computer doing his homework. And she's like, he was just in front of the door. I'm like, no, he wasn't. I'm telling you. I said, Caleb, come here. He come out. I said, she said, well, who was back there? I don't know. So he takes off. He said, I said, where was this person at? She said, they just turned and they walked up the hall. I don't know where they went. That's when I came out here. So I said, Caleb, go see what's going on. He goes out in the kitchen and all of a sudden he says, well, you don't see that? I heard the door close. He said, you don't see that every day. And I said, what? And he goes, I got out here. He said, the doorknob turned, the door opened, the door closed, like somebody walked through it. So she's kind of freaked out. And I said, what did the person you saw look like? He was my youngest is a really big kid. She said, he was a really big guy, just like him. He was wearing like a blue shirt buttoned all the way up to the neck. He had buttoned all the way down to his wrist. He had work pants on, like blue work pants and white socks and black shoes. And I laughed. I said, that's my grandpa. She goes, what? That's my grandpa. I told you were going to see weirdness. She's like, I thought you were kidding. I said, look, if it gets to be a problem, just say grandpa, grandma, whatever you think is there, just say, I'm too tired. Please not tonight. And they'll go away. They'll leave you alone. They're just checking up on the kids because something has changed in this household. And that's why he's here. He's just checking. That's all. She said, okay. And that was the end of that. And as far as I know, she didn't anything else happen. She didn't tell me, but she was sufficient. She would talk about that. She was like, Dad, that freaked me out. And I'm like, yeah, I bet it did. I mean, I still see things. I'll be sitting here watching football or so. I'll see something out of the corner of my eye and I know what it is. And it seems like that sounds like I'm being kind of nonchalant about this, but I'm not. I'm just used to it. It's like once you get past that a certain point, it doesn't freak you out anymore that much. That much. It still kind of does when it happens. You're not expecting it. Now, the next part of Grandma and Grandpa's visit, my niece, this is the part that I loved. My niece moved into my parents' house, moved back home. Can I stay here? Yes, you can live with us. She's staying with my parents. But my dad said, you got a boyfriend, but that boyfriend don't live in my house, period. Well, unbeknownst to them, she snuck him in anyway. My parents are elderly, so they don't go upstairs. They know what's going upstairs. She snuck this boyfriend in anyway. He was apparently staying there. Well, then my dad found out about it. And he said, okay, look, that's fine, but no shenanigans under my roof. I don't want to see him during the day. When you're home, he can come down all he wants, but when you're not here, he better stay in that room. I don't want to see him. Okay. So I went down one day and Dad was kind of laughing, and I said, what's so funny? He said, you're not going to believe what happened. I said, what? He says, Ray was just down here. And I said, oh. He goes, oh my God. He said, he was freaking out. I'm like, what do you mean he was freaking out? He said, he came down crying, came down the stairs crying. He said, he whispering, we got to get out. We got to call the police right now, and we got to leave. Dad said, why? He said, there's a man upstairs, and he's staring at me. He's a big guy, really big dude, and he's staring at me. He's freaking, and he doesn't go. He said, and he'll like go up the hall, and he comes back and he stands in the door and stares at me. It's freaking me. We got to go. There's a man in this house, and we're going to get killed. We got to leave. And Dad started laughing. Reaches there and picks the picture up, and he said, is this the man? Guy looked at it and said, yeah, that's him. We got to go. You know this guy? We got to go. We got to go. Dad said, that's my dad. How long's he been living here? And Dad says, well, that's the catch. That's the rub. He's not living here. He said, what do you mean he's not? I saw him. He's up there. I'm telling you, he's up. Dad said, my dad died in 1970. So what you're seeing is my dad. I can't explain it. He checks in. He's checking in. I started laughing. Then I said, well, apparently Grandpa doesn't like your house guest. He said, well, you might be right. He said the guy curled up in a ball in the fetal position on the floor and just cried until my niece got home. My niece walked in and she said, what's going on? What's wrong with you? So he starts telling her, and she goes, for crying out loud, that's just great, Grandpa. Don't worry about it. Let's go. Like it was no big deal to her either. We just thought that was hilarious.
I'm Philip Knight, and I've had a lifetime of paranormal experiences, especially my younger years. I'm one to believe that kids have more or are more sensitive to the paranormal, whether it be UFOs, aliens, ghosts, cryptids, things like that. My story begins. I was, I don't know, 5, 6 years old. And to kind of put it in context, we lived or just outside of a really small town in southeastern Kansas. And this was in the early 80s. And the town I grew up in had maybe 100 people. And it was just a really nice, quiet, kind of old-fashioned town. Had one corner store, one little gas station, and that was really it. Big farming community, but we lived out in this little farmhouse maybe a half mile from town, and no neighbors, not a lot of traffic on the roads. And we were poor, and I remember because the water in the well wasn't good, so my mom would have to boil the bath water, so to speak, to so we could take a warm bath every night. And this bathroom was just off of the kitchen towards the back of the house. And the old house, was on a foundation, on a brick foundation. So you figure probably 2 foot off the ground. I'm giving you the dimensions. That way you can understand where I was at. And there's one window in the bathroom. And, most windows are probably another 2 foot, 3 foot off the foundation. So again, I'm 5, 6 years old, and I'm going to go take a bath. It's dark outside. I don't even remember what time of year it was, but it had to be springtime, I believe. So I was going in to get to bath, and I sat down in the bathtub, and I'm looking out this window because the window was open. It was just a screen. And I turned my head and look out the window. I mean, and all that separated me from the outside with this tiny little screen. And right in front of my face was this face of a fox. And it had this like, I don't know, malevolent grin. I mean, sharp teeth. I mean, it was really, it was a wide face. But all I can really relate it to is a fox. And it scared me to death. So I'm figuring, just in my head now, 40 some years later, it's probably about 5 foot tall. It didn't do anything. It didn't try to go through the screen or anything like that, but it was just right up against the screen staring at me and grinning. So I screamed bloody murder. And my mom comes running in, mind you, I'm 5, 6 years old. My mom comes running in and I'm out of the bathtub freaking out. And she's trying to figure out why I'm screaming. I look back and this thing is gone. I never saw it again, never had that experience again. I don't know what it is. I mean, I can speculate now because of things that have come out in recent years with cryptids and things like that, but I don't know for sure, so I'm not going to guess. But that was one of my first paranormal experiences. I would relate it to paranormal experience.
So I think my first experience that I truly remember having anything paranormal, I was very, very young. I grew up in a tiny little town, and we happened to live in the third oldest home in the town. It was a very old, turn of the century 2-story. And from the time I was little, I remember this house being just a little on the strange side. You could feel how old it was. And we didn't have a lot of money, so there was still horsehair plaster in the walls. You could hear it falling down sometimes if you banged hard enough. Uh, but when I was about 8, my great grandmother passed, and she left my mother some money. And with this money, we took a little trip. But what we really did with it was we decided to kind of take some of that horsehair plaster down, strip the walls down, and put up some paneling. And the room that my sister and I shared wasn't even actually a bedroom. It was an old dining room. Um, it was a complete pass through type of house where you would walk in and there was like a living room and a parlor and a dining room, and then it turned into a kitchen area and then back into the living room again. So you could literally just walk a path around it. And off of our bedroom was the only bathroom in the entire house. So it wasn't anything to watch my parents walk, because their bedroom was what was in the parlor, walk from their bedroom through our bedroom to go to the bathrooms. So we would often see this movement of my parents throughout the night using the bathroom or whatever they needed to do. So we're stripping, I remember helping. We stripped the walls down, and layers upon layers upon layers of this old wallpaper is coming down. And we got down to the original wallpaper. And I still remember this to this day. It scared me a little bit. When you step back to look at it, you could see where all the original furniture set against the walls when it was a dining room. So there was a shadow of a hutch. There was a shadow where the chair rail used to sit. And some, what I assume are paintings, photos, or something hung on the wall. It was a little scary seeing this there. And we actually had to stop work at that time for just a couple of weeks. It sat like that, and it was still our bedroom. We were still sleeping there. And I'm not sure what happened, or if it was us messing with the house or us peeling it back down to that original wallpaper, but it triggered some activity in the house. And my bed faced that wall. I could see it from where I sat at, and there was a little night light we had plugged in on that wall so that we could see as we came through the room at night. And I remember waking up one night because I felt like I was being watched, and I peeked over my blankets and watched as lines and lines of these shadow people walked past that light, and they would actually black it out just a little bit. You could see the light through them, and it was like a parade of these shadows going across. And for a little while, I tried to convince myself that it was my parents making that trip back and forth to the bathroom, until I realized it was just never ending. And for the next 2 weeks, every night I would wake up and watch this weird parade of shadows going back and forth across this light, and watching it, the imprints of them kind of move along that wall. Scared, scared to death. And I was so excited when they finally put the paneling up, because it stopped it. It stopped it right away. And that is the last thing I remember ever happening in that house. Is it was as if it kind of closed it off. So certainly scary for a young 8-year-old little girl. And thankfully, my little sister, who was 2 years younger than me, I don't think she ever woke up and saw it. So she wasn't privy to the weirdness that had happened. And I don't recall ever trying to tell my parents about it either. I think I probably would have thought they would have said something like, you're silly, you're having dreams, and just go back to bed.
We had gone to my wife's parents' house. This was back before we had smartphones. We just had the old flip phone, cell phones. And my wife had left her phone here. We went to her parents. My aunt had died. We went up to a fair or something up by her parents' house. We were gone on pretty much all day. And we come home. She said, "Oh, there's my phone." And I'm like, "Oh, yeah, there's your phone." We went to bed. Midnight, 1 o'clock. We went to bed. And she, the next day, got up and said, "Who's playing with my phone?" What do you mean? Well, that was back when if you took a picture, it would show the little icon on the phone that there was a picture. She goes, "Well, look at this. Somebody took a picture." I said, "Well, see what it is. Maybe one of the kids did something." She opens the phone up and looked at it and goes, and now she's dead quiet. And she says, "You need to look at this." I said, "What?" She goes, "Who's this?" And I said, "Well, it looks like Aunt Dot." And she goes, "But you can see through her." And I'm like, uh-huh. And she had a real long braid. When she was younger, her hair was really long. She had it braided. Hadn't had her hair like that for years, but you could see the braid. The part of that story is that when she died, my other cousins had said, "Well, when you die, Aunt Dot, we're going to bury your braid with you." And she said, "You will not, because if you bury that braid with me, I'm going to be really mad. And I'm probably going to come back about you guys." Ha ha ha, big joke. Well, I wasn't involved in it, so I said, "Send me the picture." So that time I went down to my mom. I said, "Mom, who is this?" And I showed her, and she said, "Well, that looks like Dot." I said, "But look really close at it." And she said, "Well, first of all, why doesn't she why is she like floating? And why can I see through her?" So I don't know, but that was in my house. I said, "It's bad enough I had Grandma and Grandpa in there. Now Aunt Dot's showing up. I don't know what to do about this." That picture we left, and that's a picture that I've still got it saved on a file of labeled "Ghost in the House."
We would sit and lay on the living room floor in the summer because we didn't have air conditioning, and we slept with windows open, and the living room was where you had the best draft come through. And we would all my brothers and sister, we would sleep on the floor in the living room just because it was cooler. And you could see the shadow from the street light. You could lay there and watch shadows walk across the wall. They were like shadow people almost. And they were all different shapes and sizes. One that sticks out was this really, really fat one. Again, I'm 4 or 5 years old. And it was like they were on a conveyor belt. It would just, like a movie on repeat all night, would just sit there and go across the wall, just move across the wall. Nothing ever happened then. But in the same house, my brothers and I had 2 older brothers, and I was the youngest of 4. And just off the living room was our bedroom. We all shared a bedroom. And when you walked in to the bedroom, just to the left of the door was my bed. My eldest brother was on the right side, facing kind of perpendicular, I guess you could say. And on the other side of the window was a big bay window, or just a big pane glass window, I guess I should say, not bay. And my other brother's bed was right under that. And I'm laying there trying to go to sleep. My brothers are already asleep. And I'm looking out the window, watching the shadow of the trees and all this. And then I noticed at the top of the window, this thing was like poking its head down. And it poked its head down like it was looking at us. And it caught my eye because it was different. It was moving different than the trees. And it just kept bobbing up and down like it was looking in the window. And then all of a sudden, I don't know what it was. It came through the window. The window didn't break, nothing like that. It wasn't like it shattered the window, but it was like it was an apparition or something. Came through the window and landed on my eldest brother, like at my head, just, I don't know, 3-4 foot away from me. And there was a huge struggle. My brother was like up and almost like fighting, and I mean, but he wasn't, he didn't wake up, but it was a struggle. And then I don't know what caused it or what not, but this, whatever it was, just went right out the door into the living room, not to be seen again.
So when I was about 11 or 12, I was not quite in junior high yet. I had made friends with a girl who had moved into our community. Her parents moved around a lot and she didn't have any friends in the area. And I was one of the kids that was quite willing to friend the new kids that had come into town. And I was very excited because I found out that she had moved into an old 3-story house that sits in the downtown area of my little community. It was always one of those places that looks a little haunted. It's one of those places when you have to walk past it, you kind of hurry up just a little bit at the end, just kind of scoot along. And I'd always wanted to see the inside of it. It's one of the older homes in Caney. You can tell that it was once very, very beautiful. It has 3 verandas on it, steps up very high. And I found out she lived in it and she invited me to come over one day. And I remember why is because she wanted me to come over and watch Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. And I hadn't got to see it yet. And she had it on VHS. She had just rented it or something, wanted me to come over after school and watch it. And I readily did because, get to go see a fun movie and you get to go into that house that you've never seen the inside of. And it was very beautiful on the inside. It was one of those old Victorians where when you walk in the front door, the staircase to the upstairs is right in front of you, a very grand, very steep staircase that went up to the second floor. And the second floor was kind of open right there. So you could see up into the hall area. And we didn't go upstairs at first. She put the movie in downstairs in the living room, which was right near the staircase. And we're watching the movie. And after a little while, I hear her mother. She calls from upstairs for her to come up for something. And she was like, just stay and watch the movie. I'll be right back. So I'm sitting there watching the movie and a really funny part came up and I wanted her to see it. So I stopped the VHS and I sat for a little bit and she didn't come back down. And I was like, where is she at? So I thought, oh, I'm just going to go up the stairs part way and I'll call for her wherever she is in the house and see if, she'll come back down. So I get up and I'm going up these very steep steps. I remember how steep they were. I had a hold of the railing just in case, because, new set of stairs. And I'm just almost to the top and I got this overwhelming, what I can only explain is this very yucky feeling. It's almost that sense of dread that kind of trickles over the top of you just a little bit, that buzz you get. And I was stopped and I was kind of contemplating turning around and going back down the stairs before I even yelled for her when this flash of green happened. And it kind of reminds me of, I don't know, like a smoke machine, only it was green colored. This flash of this smokiness right in front of me, so close, it was overwhelming. And it very quickly pushed through me. It is the weirdest feeling I've ever had in my life, and I've never had this happen since. This green, whatever it was, pushed through my body and down the staircase. And I remember the feeling of it. It was so weird. It was like I felt like the bones and the meat and the organs inside my body being pulled a little bit as it went through. It was the weird, like a slightly dragging feeling, like it had a little bit of a pull with it, and it was nauseating at the same time. It just turned your stomach. And I whipped when it did it, and it tugged me partially down the stairs, and I started to lose my balance. It was very steep, and I was caught off guard. And I managed to catch the railing with my hand very quickly and kind of stumbled and got my feet back underneath of me, and I'm nauseous and I'm scared because I don't know what's happening, and I turn and look at the bottom of the stairs, and here is this green thing. And I still to this day don't know how to describe it. It's not even drawable. It's like this floating weird mass of super tight smoke. It's the only way I can come up with how to explain it. And I was just because now I can't get downstairs. It's sitting at the bottom of the stairs, and I'm like, what am I going to do? And I think I'm going to go back upstairs and find my friend. And as I start to turn to go back up the stairs, it rushes me again, and it rushes up the stairs, and it goes back through me again, and I almost fall backwards. And this time when it happened, it felt even worse. It kind of going through me, that feeling of just it dragging through the center of my body. And I lost it. The nausea and the sickness that came along with it. I did not go back up the stairs because I wasn't going to turn around and see if it was still there. I booked it down those stairs so fast and straight out that front door. And I ran and didn't stop until I got home, which is saying something because in order to get home, I had to go about 8 blocks, cross a highway, and then 2 more blocks. Straight into my house. Didn't even stop to tell my mother why I was there. I remember her questioning me as I ran through, what are you doing home? I thought you were at so-and-so's house. And later on, when I had finally kind of calmed down, I finally reemerged from my bedroom, and she had a lot of questions, and I don't remember what I ended up telling her, something like, oh, it wasn't fun over there. I decided to come on home. And I didn't even know my friend's phone number, so I couldn't call her and tell her why I was suddenly not there anymore. And I didn't end up talking to her about it later. I was nervous to ask her about it because I'd have no idea why. I just was very nervous about it. And I always wondered what had happened because she moved just a month later. She had only been there for just a couple of months, and she moved a month later. And I never did find out if it was because her family had to move again because of her father's job. They skipped through communities a lot, or if they left that house because they knew what was going on there. And I had just been kind of privy to that. It's one of the scariest things that's ever happened to me. And I've never had that happen again. So.
Then the last house we lived in where I really grew up was definitely had activity in it. I never felt threatening. Nobody was ever hurt or really even scared. Because by this time I was around 7. So it's kind of become old hat. It's kind of part of it, just the way things are. And my grandparents lived down in Hot Springs, Arkansas, and they would come up every Christmas. Well, either they would spend Christmas Day with us, or they would drive on to Wichita and spend Christmas Day with my aunts and uncles up there. So they would either spend Christmas Eve or Christmas Day with us. So me being the youngest, I got to pull couch duty. And I was laying there one night, And somehow, some way, I woke up and I saw it was a full body, looked like an old woman, like in a flower print dress with the frills or the lace, I guess you could say, and old horn rim glasses, that era. And she looked just like my great grandmother who used to live in that house, because that house was my great grandparents' house. And after they passed away, my dad got it and we remodeled and all that. But there was always something happening in that house. You could hear footsteps at night walking down the hallway. Rocking chairs would just start rocking by themselves. Doors would open and close. Pictures would literally float off the wall and then drop. They wouldn't just drop. So there was always activity. So by the time, I was out of there, it was just like, hey, that's just Grandpa.
The haunted stuffed bunny. This is one of the ones that people love to hear. And this is one of the worst ones for me. So I was around 16 in high school, and I had a stalker, you could kind of say. It was a boy from another town nearby who really liked me. And I did not really like him back. He was not one of my favorite people. He had kind of a bad reputation, and I tried everything to distance myself from him. But he always managed to track me down, and he would ply me with gifts and unwanted things that I would have to give back. And one day in particular, I had been out with friends and they had come to drop me off, and he was waiting at my house, which I was super upset about because he's figured out where I live. And he's talking to my mother, which is making me even angrier. And I get out of the car and stomp up to my front door. What are you doing here? And he plays the same thing he always does. And, I brought you these things, and, I really wish you would let me take you out. And I did the same old, no, I'm not interested. I'm so sorry. And he forces these gifts on me, and he refuses to take them back. And he ends up leaving them on their porch. And what it was a potted lily, which sadly looked very close to the ones that they would have in churches during Easter Sunday services. And it was Easter time. So I always kind of wondered how he got a hold of those lilies. And a little piece of jewelry, which I think was a necklace, and a stuffed Easter rabbit. It had big long ears, of course. It had one arm sewn in with a carrot sewn into it. And big white felt teeth, dangly legs. And when you pushed its other paw, it would giggle. The terrible thing is that this giggle was maniacal. This giggle was not a good giggle for any kind of a stuffed animal. I don't know which company invented this thing, but it was the thing of nightmares. And it gets so much worse. So my mother thought it was cute, and she was really poking at me because she thought the situation was funny, that this kid kept showing up and giving me weird gifts. And she brought them into the house, which I was upset about. And she would keep playing that bunny because she thought it was funny that it would cackle like it did. And I got really upset about it after a while. I was like, quit playing it. And finally, I just pulled the back off the battery pack, pulled the batteries out, tossed them in one direction, and I threw that up on our kitchen counter, the rabbit, and just walked away from it and forgot about it. Well, later that evening, I had gotten ready for bed, and at the time, one of my very good friends was staying with us for a couple of weeks, so we had set her up like a little cot inside my bedroom. So we were kind of splitting the room at the time, and I came in to get ready, and my friend was laughing, and it was because my mother at some point had come in and put that bunny on my bed. And that was the last straw for me. I had it, and I grabbed that bunny up and I chucked it as far as I could get it underneath my bed. And my bed was butted up into a corner of the wall. So there was no way it was going to fly out the other side. And I was like, good riddance. I'm just going to forget it's there. Go to sleep like normal. Everything's great until about 2 o'clock in the morning when my friend was shaking me awake, scared to death. And I was like, what, what's going on? You wake up out of a deep sleep. And she goes, don't you hear it? And I was like, hear what? And then I stopped and really listened, and I realized I could hear that bunny cackling underneath my bed. It was muffled because it was under the bed. And I was like, what the heck? So I flip on the light and I'm on all fours trying to reach underneath my bed and grab this bunny out. And I'm cursing my mom out at the same time, too, in my head, because I'm thinking this woman went and found some batteries, threw them back in. And then, when she chucked it on the bed, the batteries were in it and it's just gone off or something. So I finally roosted out from underneath my bed. I come dragging it out and I flip it over and realize that the back button cover, the battery cover, is still not on it because I never screwed it back on after I took the batteries out, and there are no batteries in it. And I'm thinking, okay. And I'm looking it over, and then I automatically think, oh, wait a minute, maybe it has one of those little button batteries in it, so you can try it at the store. Because those were kind of new out at the time. You could start to try things at the store at the time, because this would have been the mid 90s, I believe. So I'm hunting and I'm feeling around inside and I can't find anything, but the wires are there that go from the battery pack. And I was like, oh, I'll take care of this right now. And I yanked the wires away from the battery pack and it kept laughing. And now I'm starting to get unnerved instead of mad. And I chucked it at her and I said, see if you can figure it out. So she's looking it all over. And when she realizes that, the wires have been disconnected from the battery pack, she throws it at me, scared. She's like, this should not be working. So I take it out and I'm banging on my mother's bedroom door because I'm thinking this is her fault. She's put this in my room. And I get her up and I'm like, I can't get this to stop. Get it to stop. So she drags it back out into the kitchen and we pull out the tool drawer and we gutted this thing. I pulled stuffing out of the way. I turned the hand wrong side out, the paw where the little clicker was. We yanked that out. That thing was still playing. There was nothing left of the wiring of the battery pack. And I was just sick. I was like, what's happening? And I'd had it. I scooped it up and we lived out in the rural area of our little town. So we had burn barrels because we didn't have regular trash service. And I was like, I'm taking care of this thing right now. So I grabbed it and I grabbed a lighter and I took it out to the burn barrels and I stood there and watched it burn. And that cackling didn't stop until it was black. I still have never figured out how that happened. Now, interestingly enough, just a few years ago, I was listening to Jim Harold's Campfire, and he had a lady on who told a story very similar to it. And I've always wondered if maybe I should contact him and see if I can't find this woman. She told a very similar story of going and staying at a friend's house for a sleepover, describing this crazy bunny that her friend had, and it's the exact description of mine. And they went to bed one night on her living room couches, and she woke up in the middle of the night because she felt like something had bit her. And when she got up, she looked down and that bunny was laying on her leg. And it was cackling maniacally. And they couldn't get it to stop either. And this thing had bit her with its felt teeth. Really, really strange. Luckily for me, that guy who was stalking me, that was his last time trying to get my attentions, thank goodness. And I always wondered if maybe there was like the fates allowed him to get this like haunted bunny and give to me as his like last hurrah of trying to get my attentions. So
when I was in the Marine Corps, I was in Florida, and I had been in right about a year. I was still in school, and my grandmother had been diagnosed with cancer the year before. And that evening, I got a Red Cross message. And for those that aren't familiar with that, in the military, when an emergency happens at home, you notify the Red Cross and they send a message to your command. Your command notifies you, and then you take action from there, and they give you the leeway to do that. But I received a Red Cross message saying that my grandmother wasn't going to make it probably through the night. And so I called home, got the details, all that, started kind of making plans, figuring out what I was going to do. But I don't know what time in the early morning it was. I don't know, probably 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. I wake up and my grandmother's standing at the foot of the bed. And she tells me, I'm okay. I'm not hurt anymore. And that's kind of it. I mean, she was gone. So I went back to bed. The duty from downstairs early the next morning, I don't know, it's probably about 6, comes up and knocks on the door. And I get up and answer the door. And he's like, Lance Corporal Knight? I was like, yeah. He said, I got some news for you. I said, I know. I said, my grandmother's dead. She passed away last night. And he's like, what? So how do you know? I said, well, I just know. I mean, just talking with my family last night and all that. He's like, okay. He said, well, we'll get things going in that direction then.
I was around 17. Still, of course, living with my mother. My parents had been divorced for a couple of years, so it was just her and I and my little sister living out in this little farmhouse area. And we had a lot of outbuildings, so we tended to keep farm cats because, mice and other rodents and things you didn't want in the grain feed and stuff like that, because we did keep a few cattle. They would come and go like all barn cats do. Some of them stay for a few years. Some of them are gone. Some of them leave for a while because, they're catting around, and then would come back in again. We had this one cat show up one day. He was kind of a manky looking cat. He was a little on the fat side, so I assumed that maybe someone had dropped him off because he looked like he was well fed. He was pretty mottled colored. He was mostly black gray, but he had a little bit of browns mixed in with him here and there. He was not the prettiest cat, I will say that. He, however, was a very good mouser. Not super friendly with us, but we didn't really care because he was a barn cat. But he was nice enough. He would kind of come up and let you scratch him once in a while. And my mom ended up naming him Pudge because he was so tubby in the middle. He was always kind of tubby. So she called him Pudge. And like I said, he was our good mouser. And I came home from school one day and Mom was looking a little sad. And I asked her what was wrong. And she said, well, Pudge got hit by a truck today. Because we lived right off of a main road that comes out of our little town. And I was like, oh, that's too bad. We were kind of used to it, though. That's the life of, living on a farm. Cats get killed on the roads. And I was like, did you want me to help you bury him? Which we did, regardless if he wasn't really a pet. We have coyotes out in the area, so you tend to bury stuff like that just so you don't have coyotes coming up into the area. And she was like, oh, no, don't worry. I already did it. When I found him, he was already pretty stiff. And so I just scooped him up in a shovel and I put him down in the corner of the pasture. And I was like, all right. And I didn't think anything more of it for quite a while. And about 2 weeks later, um, I watched Pudge walk in from the highway. And I went and grabbed my mom and I was like, Pudge is outside. And she said, well, he couldn't be because he just got hit. Is it just a cat that looks like him? And I was like, maybe, but how would you find a cat that would look like Pudge? He was so oddly colored. And the brown spots are in the correct spot. So I took her outside and he acted and looked, frankly, it was just Pudge. And I just told her, I was like, you must have, maybe it was another cat that got hit that looked similar. Um, I assumed maybe he was in bad shape when she found him, getting rolled or hit by a truck. Um, she looked a little bothered by it, but she was like, "Oh, I must have been mistaken. It must have been someone else's cat that got hit because this is Pudge." So we were like, strange, but went on with our business. Um, a number of months pass, and sadly, one day I actually watched it happen. I watched Pudge cross the road to get back over to our house, and he got hit by a car very violently too. I wished I hadn't seen it. Not something you want to watch happen. But I was like, well, that's the end of that cat. And I went out and checked, and he was gone. It had actually crushed his head. Um, Told my mother later on, I actually took care of it that time, but at that time it was winter and it was too cold to bury him. So what we did was we moved him just to the inside of a barn section where coyotes and stuff couldn't get to him, waiting for the ground to defrost enough that it would be easier to bury him later on. Kind of covered him up in some plastic and left him there. And we waited a few weeks and we had a sunny day and mom was like, let's try to get him in the ground. I don't want him in there anymore. Cause what if bugs or, even though it was winter, she was like, I don't want anything messing with it. Or him starting to stink. So we went out to, collect him and we moved the plastic back and he wasn't there. And I was like, well, have you left the barn door open or something? Has something gotten here and pulled him away? And I was looking around and you could see the spot where he had laid because it left a little yuck behind. But there was no drag marks or anything through the dust on the barn floor. You'd think that if an animal had gotten in and rooted underneath that plastic and dragged him off, there would have been drag marks. There was nothing. It was just the print and nothing else beside it. But I was like, okay, weird, but an animal dragged him off. It's fine, it's fine. Until about 2 weeks later, when we watched this cat walk back in the property out of the pasture. And my mom saw it first and came and got me. And she was like, Pudge is back. And I was like, haha, what are you talking about? And she goes, I am very serious. Come with me. And we walked out, and by that time he was up in the driveway, and it was that cat. He looked a little worse for wear, but his head was fine. It was Pudge. And I was like, I don't know what's going on now. This is what is happening here. And she was just like, we're not going to talk about it. We're just going to go on with our lives. And I was like, okay, here we go. So all is fine for a number of months. All is good. Pudge is catching mice like he should. And one day he gets hit by another vehicle. And this time he is flat. This cat is flat. And my mom actually called me while I was at school during my lunch break and was like, Pudge got hit. He is flatter than flat. And I was like, are you sure it's him? Are you positive this is Pudge? And she's like, it is absolutely him. And she goes, I'm calling up the farm hands because we had a couple of guys who would do chores and work with the cattle and stuff for my mother on our little farm. And she's like, I'm calling the farm hands. The dump pile across the road needs to be burned off. This is it. And I was like, okay. And when I got home, there was a raging fire. We had like a burn area for scrap wood and, mattresses and things that would come along. And it was overdue for a burn. And she had them scoop that cat up and get that fire super hot and throw the cat on top of it. And she told them, she was like, you stand there and you watch and make sure that that cat's done. And they were like, yes, ma'am, looking her for very strangely, I'm sure, wondering why she's wanting this, cat to burn. Uh, and she told me, she's like, it's all taken care of. It's burnt to the ground. I went over there and looked. There was nothing left of that cat. It was incinerated. And I was like, thank goodness, because, fire is definitely going to take care of whatever this issue is. Until just a couple weeks later, when this cat, who looked a whole lot like Pudge, walked back in on the property. And my mother decided that she was going to pretend that none of it had happened. She wouldn't even talk about it for quite a while. Pudge lived after that for quite a long time. And then one day he just walked off the property and never came back. It never happened again where he died some way and then resurrected himself. So he just left and then we never ever saw him again. And we have no idea what to say about that. Some people think that maybe he was some kind of a familiar, like he was just borrowing that body. That's why every time he came back, he looked just a little worse for wear. Like the body was just getting worse and worse. I don't know what that was, but I don't think I want to know. This is one of the weirdness that my family has gone through.
A few years later, I was out of the military. And I'm not one to be affected by dreams all that much. But this dream seriously affected me. I was living in Arkansas, in Batesville, and I was at work at a prison, as a corrections officer at the time. And I, obviously went to sleep. And all of a sudden, I was obviously in a dream state. Whether it was a dream or whether it was a spiritual attack, I don't know. But it was definitely something along that lines, I truly believe. Because, 20 years later, it still affects me. But this thing, I'll just say that. I don't know what it is. And I don't know that I really want to give it a name. Like, landed on my chest. And this was the blackest black that you can imagine. I mean, it was just a void of any light except for red eyes and gleaming sharp white teeth. And I couldn't breathe. I was gasping. I could not breathe. And what felt was going to be my last breath, I whispered the slightest little whisper. I whispered the name Jesus. And this thing, it was the most blood-curdling scream that I've ever heard. And I realized I was able to breathe in a little bit, get a breath. Okay, so I said it a little bit louder this time. And this thing is screaming and all this. Let me back up. In this dream state, I was in what looked to be a palace, a throne room of some sort. The big marble pillars had like gold ivy wrapping the pillars. The floor was immaculate and shiny. Just like glass. Well, when this thing landed on me, everything dissolved, like melted away. It's the most putrid green and fog and all that. Just melted away, just rot. So when I started saying the name Jesus, every time I would say that, this room would rebuild a little bit by little bit. And I kept saying this because I was able to breathe and I was able to start screaming. I was screaming at the top of my lungs. And every time this thing would scream and just like shrink away. And until I was just screaming at the top of my lungs, and this thing like just almost exploded and just to a black mist and ran. And by the time that it was said and done, this room was rebuilt to its majesty. I mean, it was just the most beautiful place you'd ever seen. I was so disturbed by this that I actually went to work the next day and spoke with the chaplain at, at the prison. I'm like, hey, Pastor, what do you make of this? Do you think it was just a dream, or what was it? And he's like, well, everything that you're saying is biblical. He said, plus, I mean, think about this. You work in such a negative place, surrounded by four walls, 12 hours a day in a prison with murderers, with drug dealers, with you name it. He said, something may have went home with you. I was like, well, okay, well, fair enough. It makes sense. But yeah, to this day, that it really still disturbs me. I get goosebumps every time I tell that story.
In the shadows they hide, eyes that pierce through the night, whispers turn into cries, fear grips tight with no fight. Claws scrape the midnight air,